It's time to check in on the NFC East post-draft NFL draft review, going through all the divisions, all the teams and their picks, and how these teams look heading into 2023. Coming up on today's Peacock and Williamson.
NFL analyst Brian Peacock and former NFL scout Matt Williamson bring you expert NFL analysis every day in less than 30 minutes. Get an inside look into the NFL on the field and in the front office. With elite breakdowns, next-level analysis, and in-depth information only for the real NFL fans. This is Peacock and Williamson, and it starts now.
Welcome to the Peacock and Williamson NFL Show. Brian Peacock alongside Matt Williamson at BD Peacock at Williamson NFL. Thanks, everybody, for making us your first listen on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Shout out to the everydayers. Make sure you're subscribed up on YouTube and everywhere you listen to your podcasts. All right, Matt, we're getting into the NFC East here as we do, going through all the draft classes and looking at how these teams are built into 2023 and how these draft classes could impact things this season and beyond. And we're also compiling a little bit of data with the salary cap, right? What's the salary cap conditions for these teams, which always changes the way that teams are built?
Yeah, I think it's a good way to start the show every time we break down a division. But to be honest, this one's not as noteworthy as some of the others. So Washington's the worst right now. They only have 2.4 million. The Giants have 5.5. Dallas is at 10. Philadelphia is at 14. So no one's in dire straits. Maybe Washington has to make a small move or two, get their guys signed. But next year, Washington is quite a bit. They have the fifth most cap space in the league. So maybe they're gearing up for a big move, a big quarterback. They have 85 million. The Giants have 63 million. They're the eighth best right now. And Dallas and Philly are pretty healthy as well, 24, 29 respectively for those two teams. So not a lot of salary cap, massive implications, but Giants and Washington are pretty geared up for next year to add to their teams.
And the Eagles, of course, doing big things in the draft to try to replace some of those players that might get expensive that they won't be able to re-sign in the future. Great team building. Howie Roseman getting a lot of credit, even so much credit that the other GMs around the league are getting jealous and annoyed at how much credit he's getting. We'll get into that Eagles draft, but we're going alphabetical here. So starting with the Dallas Cowboys 2023 draft class, and it started off at pick 27 in round one. Defensive tackle out of Michigan, Mazi Smith, came back in round two with Luke Schoonmaker, tight end out of Michigan. DeMarvion Overshadowing, inside linebacker out of Texas in round three. Round four, Viliami Fehoko, Junior Fehoko, as they call him locally here, San Jose State defensive lineman. Asim Richards, North Carolina offensive tackle in round five. Round six, Eric Scott Jr. out of Southern Miss, cornerback. That was the only pick that was moved around in this draft. They stood pretty pat, just drafting it with all their selections, rounds 1 through 7, late in those rounds, except for that one early round 6 pick of Eric Scott Jr. Deuce Vaughn, great story there, where his father's in the organization in the scouting department and gets to make the call and drafting his son, running back out of Kansas State. More on him in a second, what kind of player he is, and then finishing up round 7, Jalen Brooks, South Carolina, wide receiver. Let's go back up to the top, though, with Mazi Smith. Yeah. It feels like a little bit of an un-Cowboys-like selection. They go a little more flash, and they've done a really good job, actually, of drafting in recent years. So shout out to the Jones family for what they've done and how they've drafted for this football team. But maybe almost there's a lot of upside with Mazi Smith because, he's on Bruce Feldman's freak list, 6'3", 323 pounds, but almost a little practical of a pick here. It's like, well, we got to get better on the defensive interior, more of a nose tackle type of a guy. Maybe more there as a pass rusher because of his athleticism into the future. But, maybe just a little practical to try to say, like, well, this is a need. Let's go fit this need and not try to swing for a home run.
Coming into this draft, I thought defensive tackle and tight end were their two biggest needs, and they did that back-to-back. Both Michigan Wolverines, which was a trend in this draft too. Teams taking two of the same, players from the same teams. And if you recall, the Bills jumped up to 25, the pick before Dallas, to take Kincaid. So I wonder if they got a little stunned by that and settled for Mazi. Would they have jumped on Kincaid and really enhanced that passing game after adding Brandon Cooks and maybe Gallup's, healthier this year? Who's to say? But apparently Buffalo thought they would.
And it sounds like everybody had Kincaid really high, by the way, too. So it seems like that is plausible that maybe Kincaid was the guy, and they almost had to settle a little bit for Mazi Smith.
Exactly. And then you come back with the tight end in the next round, which I thought was a little early for Schoonmaker, but we'll get to him in a minute.
Yeah.
We talked Packers yesterday, and I think we brought up Rashawn Gary. And Mazi Smith's kind of the same version to me. I mean, he's like the nose tackle version of Rashawn Gary in that 5-star recruit. You mentioned the athleticism's off the charts. I mean, it's almost like urban legend. Like they had in Michigan's weight room, they had to alter some of the machines because this guy was too strong and explosive for his size and all this stuff. I don't know if I believe or not, but he was number 1 on Feldman's list, as you mentioned. Half a career sack, though. I mean, he doesn't make any plays.
If you see his highlight reel, it's amazing how he moves and how explosive he is on his size, and you can see it. And I think that's one where a D-line coach is like, dude, give me this guy who's this explosive and this big, and we'll make something out of him, and he'll be a better pro than he was a college player, and we'll teach him some pass rush moves, and we'll get him upfield a little bit more. I think that's the idea there. But for me, and you mentioned Schoonmaker, and I did feel like, I keep bringing it up with the tight ends in this class. For how many good tight ends there were, I don't think a lot of teams got value and let those tight ends fall. They kind of pressed them even earlier than I expected, and I expected it to be the opposite, where, oh man, you're going to be able to get a really good tight end that falls to you in round 3. The Pittsburgh Steelers did, and there were reasons why. Darnell Washington fell a little bit, but Schoonmaker, late round 2, felt a little bit high. I guess, a round early is not that bad if he's a really good player. Complete tight end, right? Why tight end? But looking at this class, if Mazi Smith doesn't develop more of a pass rush, and you just got kind of a nose tackle, and look, he could probably be better as a sort of a 2-gapping nose tackle too. For all of his gifts, there's a lot more development that needs to happen with Mazi Smith. I like the player a lot. Would have preferred him in the second round than late 1. What if it was Michael Mayer in round 1 and then a defensive tackle? I don't know, Zach Pickens or somebody else late round,
Benton or somebody like that.
Oh, right. Yeah. Would you have liked that class? Would you have liked that that draft class better?
Maybe. I don't know. I mean, probably, because I thought it was early on Smith, early on Schoonmaker. It seemed like you were paying retail costs for these guys, and D-tackle was a lot thinner than tight end. As you mentioned, tight end was loaded. Quick note on Smith. Part of his lack of production was the scheme. They were very content with him eating blocks and not attacking upfield. So maybe that's, that club's in his bag. We just didn't see much of it. I liked Schoonmaker, I think, more than most people out there. He was my 5th or 6th tight end, where most people had him 7, 8 in a deep class. I think he's a really good mover, a really good player. But again, I mean, 58th overall in a loaded tight end class. I mean, you're kind of paying $1 for $1,
Right. And it's when the Cowboys were on the clock, they're probably like, oh, we're golden. Let's go D-tackle. It's not as deep with a defensive tackle class, and it wasn't a great interior defensive line class. Much more likely to have really good tight ends fall than defensive tackles fall in this class. And then all of a sudden in round 2, guys started going a little bit sooner, and maybe there was a Sam Laporta that they expected to get in round 2 that wasn't there, or something like that. So, from the plan of where it was when they were on the clock at 27 versus what it turned out, maybe that changes things. And obviously we're looking at it in hindsight in some ways. And so maybe the plan wasn't bad at all for what the Cowboys did, but the other teams didn't want to allow them to, get Kincaid in round 1 or get more value with tight end a little bit later.
Yeah. And I just double checked. He was the 5th tight end off the board. So at that point, Kincaid, Laporta, Mayer, Musgrave all fell. And the guys that went right after him were Strange, Kraft, Washington, who had a knee. Maybe you just like them noticeably better than those guys. So I kind of get it, to your point that maybe they were, I don't want to say sniped twice, but maybe the draft, the first 2 rounds didn't go their way for either one of those picks.
Darnell Washington was still there for them in the 3rd round when they came up again, when they drafted Overshadowing out of Texas. Let me see. There was another, and then Kraft and
I mean, I don't think Strange is as good as those guys. I thought he was overdrafted. He was there right after Schoonmaker too. But,
right. Yeah.
So all in all, it's fine. It's just not great.
Yeah. Just the theme in this class, and I'm not even trying to say the Cowboys did a poor job there. And we'll see what these guys end up looking like. And I think there's upside in both of those first 2 picks, but just the tight end value was just, it's something that it's I keep talking about it. It's bothering me in this class. It's like, man,
I hear you.
They got such better value at tight end with so many good ones in this class, and they just didn't. And it kind of speaks to just how it was a somewhat of a weak class altogether. So tight ends, I think, just were rated high on everybody's board.
And I wonder if so many teams had the same plan coming in. We're not going to pay for a free agent tight end. We'll be one of the teams that gets one, and then all of a sudden it's like, these are going to look quicker than we should. Than we thought. Better jump on it.
Right. So after Mazi Smith, Luke Schoonmaker, rounds 1 and 2, DeMarvion Overshone, Texas inside linebacker. I want to talk about the 4th rounder, Fehoko, out of San Jose State. He's sort of a hybrid end tackle. Late round 4, not terrible value for him. I thought, he was a day 3 guy for sure. Sort of a try-hard player, 6'4", 280 pounds. I kind of like him as someone who could be a defensive end on early downs and then move inside and rush. So even if he is a defensive tackle long-term in his career and kind of bulks up and is that guy on 3rd down, very, very different than Mazi Smith. And who knows, maybe they'll be rushing into each other at some point. So good player. I don't see him as necessarily a starter, more of a rotational guy, but a try-hard player that has a chance to stick for a long time in the NFL. And then Deuce Vaughn is the other one I want to point out. Great story and all, but and he is the smallest guy. I think, did I see that he is the shortest player drafted in NFL history at 5'5"?
I saw that too, and I wasn't willing to throw it out there because I wasn't certain if it was true or not, but it's very close if not. I mean, he is tiny. But obviously the Darren Sproles comparisons, but he's even littler.
Right, at Kansas State, even smaller, but he's pretty rocked up too, like Sproles was, surprisingly strong, 180 pounds. At 5'5" means you're pretty well built. And obviously you're not going to go that high if you're that small, but certainly deserved to be drafted. And I don't think this was even like a nepotism pick. I mean, it was a great story that it was, to that team, the Cowboys, where his father works, but he should be going in that area. It's not like they just threw him a bone in round 6. So I actually like that pick a lot. And I think he's got an opportunity to be a nice little player for them. The thing that's rough about players who are that small is even if they're good receivers, they just kind of get lost and they don't have any range as a pass catcher.
And the other problem is too, I haven't studied his pass protection, but 9 out of 10 of those dudes can't pass protect. So when they're in the game, all the defensive linemen know if we bring blitz, they don't have enough guys to pick us up. I mean, people don't think of that aspect of it, but there's an X's and O's aspect of if he's the only back in the game, they're only going to have 5-man protections most likely, or, you can kind of dictate things that way. And so you have to be a special receiver. I mean, he's good.
That's one of the things about Darren Sproles is even though he's undersized, he would stick his face in there. He would crush guys in the past. He had the famous block against, was it Sean Merriman?
I think that's it. Yeah, boy,
he deleted him on a block. And Merriman I don't think Merriman was like trying to bear down on that hard. He was probably not expecting it. He just like, nope, I'm going to hit the hell out of you right in the chest and took him down. I love that.
And one of the issues too, like even if Vaughn it's not even like I'm too little, I just get run over, or I'm not willing. Sometimes the arm length just kills them. Like if he's trying to block Micah Parsons in practice, Parsons is going to get an arm on him a foot before Vaughn can even touch him. You know what I mean? So it's just a big disadvantage. The one guy I wanted to highlight though is Asim Richards, the tackle from North Carolina. I didn't know who he was until the Senior Bowl, and he just kept catching my eye. He plays like a tackle. He's a good athlete. He's light on his feet, but he's only 6'4". So is he a tackle to guard? Is he a 6 guy? I think he's an interesting player though. I liked him in the 5th round.
Sounds like they're going to try him at guard. I only have his height and weight. I don't see his arm length on here. So that's, a big part of it. When you see a shorter offensive tackle, just over 300 pounds.
I mean, they have Tyler Smith and what's-his-face Smith. It's been Tyron Smith. So there's a guard makes more sense.
Not an immediate need, but you might need talking about a 5th-round pick, might need a flex offensive line. Might need a swing tackle too.
Yeah.
All right, so interesting class with the Dallas Cowboys in that I could see in a few years being like, okay, yeah, Mazi Smith, he's a freak, developing into a stud defensive lineman. You got a starting tight end, you got some really nice rotational pieces and depth in the day 3 range of this roster. Maybe Overshone's a long-term starter at linebacker for them, and then I could also look back in a few years and be like, man, they got no impact from this draft. Some backups and kind of a very pedestrian couple of starters in the first 2 rounds. So this is a really wait and see class for me.
Yeah, they've drafted extremely well, so I give them the benefit of the doubt, but I'm not sure the first 2 rounds went their way. I would give it a pretty low grade, C minus. I mean, in the middle of May, without seeing them with stars on their helmet, I'm not blown away by this class at all. It doesn't really move the needle for me, but we'll see. I mean, it's not terrible.
All right, ton more draft classes to get here in the NFC East. The New York Giants, the Washington Commanders, and the Philadelphia Eagles next. Today's episode of Peacock and Williamson is brought to you by Built Bar. Tons of new flavors at Built.com. How about Red Velvet Puff, Birthday Cake Puff? The peanut butter bar is back in stock and on sale right now at Built.com, and it is my favorite bar. If you're going to go to any bar, go to the OG peanut butter bar. And most Built bars have only 140 calories and only 4 grams of sugar, but a whopping 17 grams of protein. Tons of amazing flavors and new flavors and seasonal flavors all the time at Built.com as well. I don't know how they make healthy taste so amazing, but this is what you're looking for if you're looking for a snack. You don't want all the sugar. You don't want all the calories, and you need to get that protein every day. And most Built bars are set off because of their 100% real chocolate. I mean, it's most bars you get, it's like, chocolatey flavor, kind of brownish colored stuff. This is legit, real, 100% real chocolate that envelops most Built bars. So go to Built.com, find all the fantastic flavors and varieties of bars, or you can find them on your local Walmart and Sam's Club shelves as well, and then thank us later. And of course, you can find all the varieties, and you got to check it out at Built.com. Okay, New York Giants. 2023 NFL draft class started off with pick 25 in round 1. Deonte Banks, speedy cornerback out of the University of Maryland. John Michael Schmitz, the center from Minnesota in round 2. Round 3, Jalen Hyatt, another speedy player on the outside, this time wide receiver out of Tennessee. Eric Gray, running back out of Oklahoma in round 5. Trey Hawkins, the third. Old Dominion corner. Old Dominion had a really nice draft.
Good draft, yeah.
This year. On day 3. And then a couple of 7th round picks, Jordan Riley, Oregon defensive tackle, and Javarius Owens, safety out of Houston there. But we got to start at the top. And I know you did a lot of work because you thought the Steelers might be interested in Deonte Banks, the corner out of Maryland.
Yeah, and I like him quite a bit. I mean, I often compared him and Porter. Who would I prefer? And they were very similar. They're both long press man corners. And frankly, when you watch both their tapes, as the season went on, teams didn't throw at them very often. So they didn't have great ball production, but because people didn't go their way all that much. And if people don't realize, if our listeners don't realize this, the Giants probably play the most press man coverage in the league, with Wink Martindale as their defensive coordinator. And they definitely play with the most defensive backs on the field. You know, they love 6, 7 defensive backs out there all the time. And I bet there's a lot of people out there going, I can't name very many Giant defensive backs. Well, they needed it, you know. So I think Banks is a great fit there, exactly what they're after.
Yeah, and I think there's more there, and you're hoping you can develop into even a better player than he was in college with Deonte Banks, because 6 feet, just under 200 pounds, 4.3 speed. He's a willing tackler. He can just turn and run with receivers. And when Don Martindale coached defense, when that team drafts corners, you should not be ever shocked because
right.
Man coverage there. And then John Michael Schmitz. I mean, loved him at the Senior Bowl, like starting center, cool. And then Jalen Hyatt, the round 1 stuff was a little bit crazy with him, but he's got easy speed, and he might be a really one-dimensional player in the NFL, but man, he does that one dimension really well. Can get open down the field, can get open deep. 6 feet, 176 pounds. Doesn't have to show up and be a starter on day 1, but when you go 3 wide, maybe you put one of your other receivers in the slot as the target hog there, and then you bring him in on the outside and really threaten teams deep down the field and open things up underneath. So versus when you looked at what that Cowboys class was, where it's like, I kind of got to wait and see. I really have a great picture of what all these guys are going to do and how they're going to fit in with the New York Giants.
Absolutely. I think Eric Gray's a great number 2/number 3 for Saquon as well. Quality player. Who knows how long Barkley will even be there. I would have been very critical if any team took Hyatt in the first round, or even maybe the top 50. He really only runs like 2 or 3 routes in that crazy Tennessee offense, but that's all they need him to run right now with the Giants. They have slot receivers galore. They have Hodgkins. They have Waller. They have nobody like him, though. So he could come out there and run go routes for the first couple of months as he learns to do other things and just make some room for others. So I think that's a really good fit. All of a sudden, Daniel Jones now has a variety to throw to, some depth. So I think he's in a lot better spot. But they're still going to be a run-heavy team, and the middle of their offensive line needed work. And I just mentioned it. I thought John Michael Schmitz was the perfect, hand in glove fit, for that team, that what they're trying to do, team needs. I mean, people say these cliches all the time, and I always hate it, but he just looks like a 8-year starter,
Love it. Love the draft for the New York Giants. Some guys you can plug right in, know exactly how are you going to use them. Good plan. And, Brian Dable and the staff there, I think, just has a good idea of how to put a football team together and how to coach them up. So excited about that Giants class. Well done there for, having a late first round pick for a team that maybe I think they over exceeded everybody's expectations last year.
No doubt. They got a tough schedule too. I don't know that Dayball's going to be coach of the year again next year.
Right. Yeah. And, the sheen kind of wears off too. It's like, all right, so you're going to do the $40 million a year for Danny Dimes, he better be Danny Dollars at some point, because he needs to throw for a lot more touchdown passes this year and put up a lot more points. But their defense is getting better too. And
it is. Yeah. They're moving the right direction.
Right. Yeah. Good draft there. We'll see how that goes long-term at quarterback. Next up, the Philadelphia Eagles and Washington Commanders to finish up the NFC East. Thank you, everybody, for making Peacock and Williamson your first listen every single day. Shout out to the everydayers. We've only got one division left, NFC West, coming up Friday. But tomorrow, make sure you get your questions in for our mailbag, our Twitter Thursday at BD Peacock, at Williamson NFL, or drop a comment on YouTube. And make sure you're subscribed up there. Hit the notification bell so you know when we go live, and the thumbs up and all that. We appreciate you. Philadelphia Eagles. So much has been talked about this draft class. We talked about it as, one of our favorite classes, to the point where it's almost even overrated in a way, Matt, because
right.
This class, and it's a really good class.
They're still rookies,
right? Guys out of Georgia. You never know. Every team that wins the offseason, you come back and like, I guess it didn't really turn out as we all thought in April. But this looks like a really good class and a really good plan, as we mentioned earlier, from the Philadelphia Eagles organization to be able to add this talent. And when you have to, you pay your quarterback, you have to allow free agents to leave. You're going to get comp picks for those free agents that left in a lot of ways. And then you got to replenish those players. So you lose Javon Hargrave, and Fletcher Cox is getting up there in age. So Jalen Carter, natural fit. They moved up one spot just to make sure they got the Georgia defensive tackle who might be the best player in this class, or might be, a character concern, but they have the ability to absorb that. I still think the trade up from 10 to 9 was unnecessary, an unnecessary flex from Howie to go get his guy, but he did it, and it was worth whatever it was, a fourth rounder that they used to go up and get him, because clearly the Bears weren't going to draft him at 9. And if there's another team calling from behind the Eagles, I'm sure the Bears would have taken a better offer to move back a few more spots. So I don't think it was a necessary move, but they got their guy, and we'll see how that turns out. And then they got his teammate in round 1, Nolan Smith, who, they're hoping is the same idea where you're a rotational rusher, all this speed coming off the edge. And then, once Hassan Reddick leaves and they're not going to be able to resign him, then you plug into his spot, and, you're very, very similar player with that speed coming off the edge. So you can't dislike what the Philadelphia Eagles did in round 1.
No, not at all. I mean, everyone's, patting them on the back, and deservedly so. And we've probably talked about this draft class, right after the draft quite a bit as well. But, I mean, it deserves praise. I mean, we'll see how it translates to the field. I mean, don't just anoint them. But, I mean, Georgia guys galore, 3 of them to go with 2 last year off great defenses, and that's great. And I think it is a fantastic environment for Carter, who I think was the best player in this draft. But not if it's the same as Georgia and everyone just lets him do whatever he wants and enables them. You know what I mean? Like,
that's Georgia. Like, they kept it. It's like, okay, well, we don't want the exact situation in Georgia because he got in trouble.
It didn't work out there. Right, yeah. Right. So, but I mean, he's tremendous. He fits in perfectly. I'm sure Fletcher Cox will take him under his wing. A tremendous football player. I think Nolan Smith fits exactly what they want as well. There's not much mystery. I mean, early pick, they take linemen or receivers. I mean, that's just what this team does. And I think Tyler Steen will probably be the starting guard. Also has tackle capabilities.
I love Tyler Steen. He could play tackle, a little shorter armed guy, probably just plug and play guard. He's played a lot of football. I think he's Virginia, right? Then transferred to Alabama. Really good tape there. He could play tackle in the NFL, but I think he's just built to be an NFL guard, and he's got so much experience. I wouldn't be shocked if he's a starter as a rookie with an early third-round pick, or, they've got a lot of bodies there and a lot of players. So Kelsey retires, Cam Jurgens moves inside to center, then year 2, Tyler Steen plugs in after being a backup at multiple spots, maybe then plugs in at guard. I mean, just love it. I love it for them. So 3 starters for the team that was playing in the Super Bowl, and then they come
Sidney
back.
Brown might be a starter too. Their safeties aren't great either. Yeah.
And look, Kelly Ringo out of Georgia, the corner in round 4 is still there. I mean, this dude is 6'2", 207 pounds, crazy speed. He's really tight and, a really little tight. Bit. Yeah. That's why he fell. And I think there was some character stuff that was rumored about. I don't know what's going on in Georgia, but they might have let them kind of roam free a little bit. The NFL teams might have to rein in some of these guys because it was definitely that classic college situation. It's like, we got a lot of stud players, and look, as long as you play well, we're gonna let you do some other things off the field. That's the way it feels like there. I don't want to say anything about the program, and I don't know how things are run there, but
just get that vibe.
A little too much. Like, it's like, Georgia prospect. He fell a little bit of character. Like,
yeah. And frankly, the Georgia defenders have not come in and lit the league on fire, by the way.
True. Like all together. And we see this year after year with Alabama. Like when they're together, and the guy next to you is better than the guy on the other side, and you're better than the guy on the other side, and the guy over here is better than the guy on the other side. It makes everybody play up, and then they get separated, and they get the NFL. And it's like, everyone's good here. We don't have that advantage we have every week, and you see that a lot of it. So you got to sort of slow down. These are rookies, and we'll see how the transition goes. But man, you go all the way down. They might have got 5 starters in this draft.
They might have. Real quick on Ringo, I think Sidney Brown will play a lot for them. Everyone's like, "Wow, Ringo is a steal." No, I think he was the 105th best player in the draft, and some people had him go in the first round early in the process because he was a 5-star recruit and he's big and fast, but he's got a lot of holes in his game. I mean, he's not a top 75 player, in my opinion. I don't think of him as a steal.
And they don't have to play early. That's the thing. Whether
that's the thing too. Right?
Nolan Smith, Steen, even Carter, Sidney Brown, Keely Ringo, they can just hang out and develop naturally in year 2, year 3. If they become starter, cool. If not, they didn't spend crazy resources on these guys except for Carter.
Right. And even Jordan Davis didn't play that many snaps. I mean, when it was all said and done, after they signed Sue and Linval Joseph, I mean, he was like their 4th or 5th defensive tackle down the stretch, so they got a lot of guys, is my point.
They finished up with Tanner McKee, quarterback out of Stanford, cheap long-term backup in the 6th round.
Nothing like Jalen Hurts, though.
No, completely different. Yeah.
Right, which is weird to me, but oh well.
And then Moro Ojomo, who is a Texas sort of a hybrid defensive lineman, big end, interior pass rushing defensive tackle to add some more depth on that defensive line. So, great draft by the Philadelphia Eagles.
I thought Ojomo would go higher, but he might be a tweener in a bad sense. Everyone's either versatile or a tweener if you like him. He might just be a tweener that's neither. You know what I mean?
And McKee's not the best fit as far as, what offense they run with Jalen Hurts. But at the same time, with all those mid-round quarterbacks that went a little too high, Tanner McKee was a better value at quarterback versus some of those guys. And so I think for them, they're just like, well, we need a young, cheap quarterback. He's the best one, so we're taking him.
Yeah, I mean, Minshew wasn't a good fit either. I mean, in terms of running the Hurts offense, but okay.
And it's maybe overstated the offense that Hurts is running, because you can just do everything that Hurts does.
Don't have him run.
And not run. Yeah.
Right. You just take that chapter out of the playbook.
Right. You're not calling any runs. And look, hey, if you want to go scamper a little bit, go ahead.
I mean, he can still throw it to Goddard and A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith.
Yep. Moving on to the Washington Commanders, who surprised, I think, everybody with how high Emmanuel Forbes went in round 1. Pick number 16, the 166-pound cornerback, 6'1". I think as the process went along, Matt, you just started to hear more and more about how everybody loves Emmanuel Forbes, and started to realize, okay, he's for sure going in the first round. Still didn't realize he was going to go that high, mid-first round. Pick 16 overall. They came back with another defender, one of my favorites in this class in round 2, the safety out of Illinois, Jartavius Quan Martin, who's sort of a nickel corner, a safety. I think he's not a tweener. I think he can play both. You can drop him down. You can put him in single high, super athletic. I think he jumped like 44 inches in the vertical at 5'11", 194. So really nice, versatile piece for, how offenses are going positionless, then you need some positionless defenders. And I think Jartavius Martin could absolutely be that, but also has the ability to just be like, okay, you're starting at safety, but we can do everything else with you as well. So first 2 picks, I like them. We'll see if the size for Forbes ends up being a problem, but man, he gets his hands on a lot of footballs and pretty physical for a 166-pound guy. But, when you start seeing, I don't know, Derrick Henry bearing down on you, or, Deebo Samuel, and you're trying to tackle him, it's a little bit different.
No doubt. And tremendous tape, maybe the best corner tape in the draft. I mean, and certainly the most productive, heavy zone guy, which is what they want. Read the football, attack it, long arms, doesn't play little. He's just remarkably skinny. I mean, his calves, his waist are really, really lean, and he's not going to add much more weight. I mean, to be very honest with you, I'm with you on Quan Martin. I thought he's a really good prospect and seemed to really heat up in the draft process. I mean, the more all of us learned about him, because everyone's looking at Witherspoon and Brown, the other Illinois guys, but Martin is unbelievably athletic, big slot, free safety, versatile athlete. So clearly they had goals in this draft is let's attack the defensive backfield, and then we'll go to the interior line with the next 2 picks.
Yeah, absolutely. And how did anybody throw on that Illinois defense, by the way?
Right.
And Brown and Martin. Unreal. And then Ricky Stromberg, center out of Arkansas, in round 3. And maybe I'm going to say this is, I like the Martin pick. That'll probably be my favorite. But
mine too.
My runner-up favorite pick for the Washington Commanders draft was Braden Daniels in round 4. I thought that was perfect place for Braden Daniels to go. I know some people talked about him on day 2. He played left tackle at Utah, but sort of undersized, but really athletic. I thought he could play guard or even center in the NFL. And, since they drafted a center, Ricky Stromberg, in round 3, clearly a guard. I think he's a plug-and-play guy. Could probably play early in his career. Really athletic guard out of Utah, and Braden Daniels. So like that selection, we can get guys who are starting capable on day 3. And then KJ Henry, sort of a stand-up type of a defensive end, edge rusher, 6'4", 250, super athletic. In round 5, Chris Rodriguez, a running back I really liked, out of Kentucky, in round 6. And then round 7, Andre Jones, Louisiana, outside linebacker, finishing it up in round 7. So, day 3, I thought they did fantastic. Daniels, Henry, and Rodriguez, all picks I really liked, and I thought they did great on day 2 as well. So, yeah, kudos to the Washington Commanders. I give them maybe the highest grade of this entire division, because they didn't have as much draft capital that the Eagles had to work with there. But when you factor in last year's draft and adding the extra picks, I mean, the Eagles obviously have been doing great work there building that team. But good job, Commanders. Good job, Giants, too. Dallas Cowboys,
Giants are well. Yeah,
are coming in last with my grades here in this division.
Agreed on Dallas being 4th. Forbes to 16, still I'm a little shaky on, just a little early for
it's like, okay, size, like, look, if he was 180, be like, amazing pick, right? So let's give him the benefit of the doubt. I think on this one, let's see. The tape is good. Did you get it right? Okay, then good job, you did it. And if not, then that's why some teams probably are like, we're not touching that player. And I think we're seeing less than that than we did before. But I would love to know, because this draft was so old and so small, like historically. I don't think there was an older class that I can remember in my lifetime, or a smaller class, a lighter class that I can remember in my lifetime. I wonder how many old crusty GMs were like, we can't draft that guy because he's too old. We can't draft that guy because he's too small. So those draft boards were probably pretty small for some of those teams that just they remove players that are outliers, that they're like, you have to meet this minimum. And I think teams are doing that less and less, it seems like, because they drafted a lot of those guys in this class. But I would love to see what some of those conversations were behind the scenes.
Absolutely. That's really well said. And the word I was about to say that you just mentioned is outliers. I mean, Skoronski, Bryce Young. I mean, this was a draft littered with even first-round outliers, and none more so than Emmanuel Forbes. You have to be this tall to ride the roller coaster. Well, you're not quite that tall, but your arms are long enough to get you, you had to make exceptions to your drafting and scouting rules, and none more so than this draft. I mean, it is an odd draft. Real quick, Henry, I'm not saying he's Chase Young's successor, but what's the chances Young is back? They also drafted Jones. So they're, planning for the future there a little bit. Got a lot of money invested in that D-line. They need some cheap day 3 type of guys. And we actually talked about Chris Rodriguez on Locked On Dynasty yesterday, because Ryan, my co-host, is a big Kentucky Wildcat fan. He's like, he reminds me of Brian Robinson. I mean, he's just a hard-charging downhill dude. Doesn't catch the ball that much or well, but similar to what they got, and we'll get what's blocked in a little more,
Yeah, so which is good and bad from a fantasy perspective. It's like, well, he's going to be a straight backup, so he might not touch the ball much. But if there are injuries, plug him in, right?
Those guys end up playing. Yeah.
Keep him on your watch list. Let's put it that
exactly.
way.
That's what we said too. Not bad.
All right, good stuff. That is the drafts of the NFC East. Some pretty good classes, some interesting classes there. And we'll see if any of those teams are able to close the gap on the Philadelphia Eagles. And man, the Cowboys were pretty darn good last year as well. But when you got a team like the Eagles in your division, the Cowboys could be the second best team in the entire NFC this year.
No doubt. Absolutely could. They added Gilmore and Brandon Cooks. We didn't mention guys like that. I mean, they're not drafted.
Right. Yeah, it's part of their offseason for sure. All right. Fantastic stuff. Thanks to everybody for making us your first listen. Get those questions in at BD Peacock, at Williamson NFL for tomorrow's Twitter Thursday, or drop a question in the YouTube comments. Make sure you're subscribed up on YouTube and everywhere you listen to podcasts. Matt and I back tomorrow. Peacock and Williamson.